Welcome to Princeton and Princeton University, established in 1759. Let's go! This is Nassau Street, the main street down Princeton town. It's full of tourists, students, and shoppers, busy even on a winter day. Before the Europeans came to New Jersey, this street was part of the Lenape Trail for the Native Americans traveling between the fishing grounds in Delaware and the Raritan rivers. Imagine what this must have been like then. A narrow beaten path between thick forests of pine trees with bears and coyotes and deer everywhere. It must have looked very different to what it looks like today. In Europe in the 16th century, people were emerging from the Middle Ages. They were becoming more aware and questioning. Religion still played a large part in determining how people lived. The Catholic Church was dominant and laid down the law. It was almost as important as monarchies. Sections of society rebelled against the dominance of the Catholic Church. New denominations of the Church, such as Puritans, Presbyterians, and Quakers, were created. When these new Protestant sects were persecuted, many of the followers fled to America. In the beginning of the 18th century, that is the early 1700s, the Quakers and later Presbyterians started to come and settle along this Lenape Trail in New Jersey with their slaves and families. Prince William of Orange of the Netherlands was a supporter of the new Protestant sects. So when the Presbyterians and Puritans came to New Jersey and settled along the Lenape Trail, they called this place Princetown in homage to Prince William. Eventually, Princetown became Princeton. So in 1746, a little way away to the north in New Jersey, a group of Presbyterians got together and created the fourth college in America in the town of Elizabeth. This was the College of New Jersey. Here they decided they would train new ministers to administer to the growing population of Presbyterians. Within a decade, it was decided to move the college from Elizabeth. There were many options, but when the residents of Princetown offered their own land and money for the relocation, it was decided to move the College of New Jersey to Princetown. This building, Nassau Hall, was built not looking exactly like this, but as a large stone building, and classes were held inside here from 1756. Yes, it didn't look exactly like this, but for the early colonial times, in a strange land, the building was very impressive. Even at that time, it was 3 stories high with 94 windows. Theology was the focus for the first few years in the College of New Jersey, and the lessons were all about sermons, about baptism, and such duties of ministers. The university shield, even today, shows the university's relationship to its religious beginnings. It has an open Bible with the verse, the Old and New Testament, and below it says, "Under God's power she flourishes." This building is a bit special. It's been a silent spectator of how this university has developed from the beginning. So unfortunately, it was burned down twice in its lifetime. During the first few decades from the start of the college, whether because of the focus on the subject of theology or not, the students were treated with very strict discipline. In the early 1800s, the students rioted. And at that time, in 1802, the building was burnt to the ground. In 1855, a fire broke out, and again, the building was destroyed. But because it was basically a stone building, then it was rebuilt again after 1855 in the Italianate style. And it became what we see today. In the early university days, oratory skills were considered important. The Princeton University students would go on to become ministers, congressmen, and other social and political figures, and they needed to know how to speak well. Two debating societies, the Whigs and the Clios, were formed. These stylish buildings belonged to the debating societies, much like the fraternities and sororities today. In 1969, women were first admitted to the university, just a little over 60 years ago, coincidentally at the same time that these tigers, the symbol of the university, were created. The word campus, meaning open space surrounded by buildings, originated here in this field behind Nassau Hall. Today the word campus is used widely in all educational institutions. By the beginning of the 19th century, the university was developing and flourishing. Subjects such as geology were being added, and more buildings were being created. Chancellor Green, built in 1873, is in the Gothic style of architecture, originally used between the 12th and the 16th centuries. So this building can be seen to be dark, forbidding, maybe even a little ugly. After the War of Independence, most buildings were in a light Federal or Greek Revival style. This was at the turn of the 19th century. Both of these styles are pleasant to the eye. So why did this imposing, strict Gothic style make a comeback in the latter part of the 19th century? It could all be related to Queen Victoria. In the early 1800s, she had just ascended to the throne at the age of 18. She was young, wore beautiful clothes, and the rest of society was in sync with her, whether with clothes or architecture. By 1860s, Victoria was much older, now a plump matron. She couldn't wear all those off-the-shoulder frilly stuff, and switched to a strict style, covering herself up to her neck and to her hands. So followed the fashion and the architecture, and the Gothic style was revived. In the old days, the university must have been surrounded by fields with cows and sheep grazing, and behind would have been the burgeoning university, beautiful to behold. Once the railways were in place, a small train station was created for the university students. The little train, affectionately called the dinky, would bring students to the steps of this Blair Hall. At the beginning of the 20th century, these dorms were created. They are in the much more pleasing collegiate Gothic style, not so stern, and this is where some of the students are housed today. The old library, Chancellor Green, was replaced by East Pine and then added to by the Firestone Library. Seen in the evening light with the university chapel next to it, again in the collegiate Gothic style, it really is a very beautiful building. Here is the house built in the 1830s for one of the world's prodigies, physics professor who progressed in the field of electromagnetism. His name is given to the unit of inductance, the Henry. So this house is one of 200 structures in Princeton which have been moved from its origin. This building was actually moved 3 times before it got to this resting place. The Morven House has been a fixture of Princeton from its beginning. Generations of Stocktons who have lived here are closely allied with the development of the university and the town. One of them, Joseph Stockton, along with John Witherspoon, another Princeton resident, were among those who signed the Declaration of Independence in 1776. Both General Cornwallis, who led the British troops, and General Washington of the American troops stayed at Morven House at some time during the war. While this war was raging outside, millions of unseen slaves who were brought to this country against their will and built all the beautiful homes and grand buildings all over the country were waging a war inside the homes and in fields. Their war was try to understand why their life was such as it is and then try and sustain it.
Sleepy, but I wanna lie down. I wanna lie down, baby.
In the early 19th century, the system of canals first used in Europe was brought over to America. The Delaware and Raritan Canal was developed. Soon railroads were established along the canal, making transport of goods to New York and Philadelphia easier than by road. The town and the businesses expanded and became a fitting backdrop for the university. With the growth of fascism in the 1930s in Europe, many intellectuals and scientists fled. Some of them came here to America. The most famous among them lived here in this little house. Albert Einstein lived here from 1933 and taught at the Center for Advanced Studies at Princeton University. The Institute for Advanced Studies was created in the 1930s to house scientists who needed a place to develop and advance their thoughts and theories. The 30s and 40s were a time when a great assembly of scientists were able to sound their ideas off one another and work together. Abraham Flexner, the Institute's founding director, had a vision about the Institute of Advanced Studies. He said, "This institute should be simple, comfortable, quiet without being monastic or remote. It should be afraid of no issue. Its scholars should enjoy complete intellectual liberty." The concept for the basic structure of a computer, the processing unit, input, output, memory, and a control unit was designed here at the old von Neumann building. Professor John von Neumann was a Hungarian scientist who joined the IAS. Although his original field of study was mathematics, he is acknowledged to be one of the smartest minds of the 20th century and made huge contributions to physics and computing. He collaborated with Alan Turing of Cambridge University to conceive the concept of the basic building blocks of a computer. Using his model, the Institute of Advanced Studies computer was built and completed in 1951. Alumni from the university are renowned personalities in politics, education, business, and the arts. The university endowment is around $34 billion, and it uses its wealth to support research and development. Today, the university is developing at a tremendous pace. This is the Frick Chem Lab, built with the funds from the proceeds of a chemotherapy compound discovered by Professor Edward Taylor. The Carl Icahn Lab is the Center for Integrated Genomics. Could it use some of these funds to create charitable educational institutions in poorer countries or for refugees around the world? That is a question to think about. I hope you enjoyed this look at Princeton and its history. Let's meet in the next video.